The message came on every frequency at once. Commander stood in the communications center of Unified Earth Command, watching the holographic display flicker with alien symbols. The translation software worked quickly, converting the desperate words into something humans could understand. "Please," the voice said, soft and musical despite the static. "We are dying. The swarm does not stop. They consume everything. We have sent this message to all civilized worlds. Please help us. We are the of Prime. We beg you." The message repeated, over and over, the same plea broadcast across the galaxy. Had gray hair pulled back in a tight knot. Her face showed the lines of 40 years in Earth's military. She had seen war before, but this was different. This was a cry from a species humanity had never even met. "How long has this been broadcasting?" she asked. The young technician at the console looked up. 3 days, Commander. The signal originated from the Theta sector, about 200 light-years from Earth. Has anyone responded? The technician shook his head. Not that we can detect. The galactic channels are quiet. Frowned. Earth had only discovered faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. The galaxy had known about it for thousands of years. When humans finally reached the stars, they found a vast civilization already there. Hundreds of species, all connected through the Galactic Council. But the Council had wanted nothing to do with Earth. They called it a planet where everything was too heavy, too hot, too cold, too dangerous. The gravity alone would crush most alien species. The diseases would kill them in hours. Even the air was considered toxic to many. So Earth remained isolated, ignored, forbidden from council meetings. Humans were seen as barbaric survivors from a nightmare world, too violent and too stubborn to join civilized society. Now, apparently, that civilized society was choosing to let an entire species die. Made her decision, "Get me Captain Wu." 20 minutes later, Wu walked into her office. He was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-30s, with scars on his hands from a dozen combat drops. He commanded the 3rd Marine Battalion, considered one of Earth's finest fighting units. "You heard the message?" asked. "Everyone has," Wu said. He sat down across from her, "though they sound terrified. The Council isn't responding. None of the advanced species are sending help." Wu's jaw tightened. "They're letting them die." "It appears so." Pulled up a star chart. "I want to send a fleet, your battalion, the carrier, and support ships. We can be there in 4 days if we push the FTL drives hard." "The Council won't like it," Wu said. "The Council doesn't talk to us anyway," leaned forward. "These people are begging for help and no one is coming. We have the ships. We have the soldiers. Can we really just sit here and listen to them die?" Wu studied the star chart. His expression was hard, but his eyes showed something else. Determination. "My Marines will volunteer, every single one of them." "I know they will. That's not the question. The question is whether I have the authority to send them." The truth was complicated. Earth's government was still fractured into different nations and alliances. The Unified Earth Command existed to coordinate space defense, but a rescue mission across 200 light-years, that was unprecedented. Called an emergency session of the Command Council. 12 representatives from different Earth nations joined the video call. She played them the message. The debate lasted 2 hours. Some said it was too dangerous. They didn't know what this swarm was. It could be a threat to Earth itself. Others said it was not their fight. Earth had its own problems. Why risk human lives for aliens who had never shown humans any kindness? A few said the Council would see it as aggression. Earth might be punished for interfering. Finally had enough. She stood up, her voice cutting through the arguments. "When I was 20 years old, my city was hit by an earthquake. Buildings fell. Fires started. We called for help and help came. Rescue teams from 30 different countries arrived within days. They didn't ask if it was their fight. They didn't worry about the cost. They came because people were dying. She looked at each face on the screen. We are alone in this galaxy. Every species sees us as monsters from a death planet. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are harder, tougher, and more violent than they are. But I refuse to believe that makes us worse. If being human means we help when others won't, then I'm proud to be human. The vote was close, 7-5, but it was enough. 12 hours later, the fleet prepared to launch. 3 warships, 1 carrier, and 4 support vessels. 2,000 Marines and crew members, all volunteers. Wu walked through the carrier's hangar bay, checking on his troops. They loaded weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. These were men and women who had trained their whole lives for combat. Now they would face an enemy no human had ever seen. Sergeant, a massive man who could carry a heavy plasma cannon like it was a rifle, grinned as Wu passed. About time, we showed these aliens what Earth can do, Captain. We're not showing off, Wu said. We're saving lives. Can't we do both, sir? Despite everything, Wu smiled. Maybe we can, maybe we can. As the fleet prepared for launch, the message continued to broadcast. Listen to it one more time before they left. Please, the voice said, we are dying. We're coming, said quietly to the empty room. Hold on, we're coming. The ships launched from Earth orbit, their FTL drives creating ripples in space itself. They jumped into the void between stars, pushing their engines harder than recommended, racing toward a world they had never seen to fight for people they had never met. Behind them, Earth's governments watched and waited. Ahead of them, they continued to die. And somewhere in the vast silence of space, the galaxy watched to see what they would do. No one had ever expected humans to care. That was their first mistake. The second would be thinking humans couldn't win. The planet burned below them. Wu stood on the bridge of the, staring at Prime through the. From orbit, he could see the fires spreading across the northern continent. Dark masses moved between the cities like clouds, but they were not clouds. They were the swarm. Reading massive life signs, the sensor officer reported. Signatures, billions of them. They're covering 40% of the planet's surface. Any sign of resistance? Wu asked. Minimal, detecting some energy weapons fire in the southern cities, but it's scattered. They're losing. Commander's voice came through from the command ship. We're detecting survivors in the capital city. They are holding a defensive perimeter, but it's collapsing. We have maybe 6 hours before they're overrun. Then we don't have time to be careful, Wu said. Prepare for combat drop, all Marine units. The bridge crew exchanged glances. A combat drop meant loading into assault shuttles and diving straight into the atmosphere under enemy fire. It was dangerous in the best conditions. Against an unknown enemy, it was almost suicidal. But no one questioned the order. 30 minutes later, Wu sat in the lead shuttle with 60 Marines packed around him. The shuttle's metal walls vibrated as they entered the atmosphere. Through the small windows, he could see other shuttles falling alongside them, streaks of fire against the dark sky. Corporal sat across from him, checking her medical supplies. She was young, barely 23, but she had steady hands and a calm voice that had saved lives before. She looked up and met Wu's eyes. How bad is it going to be, sir? She asked. Bad, he said honestly, but we've trained for bad. The shuttle shook violently. Warning alarms blared. Taking fire, the pilot shouted. Those things are shooting at us with bioplasma. Can you get us down? Wu asked. Working on it, sir. The shuttle twisted and dove, throwing Marines against their restraints, closed her eyes and gripped her medical bag. Then, with a bone-jarring crash, they hit ground. The rear hatch blew open. Hot, humid air rushed in, carrying a smell like burning metal and rotting fruit. Move, 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 Wu shouted. The Marines poured out of the shuttle into chaos. They had landed in what looked like a city square, surrounded by elegant buildings with curved walls and spiral towers. but the beautiful architecture was with blast marks and covered in a black, sticky substance. And they were everywhere. They were the size of large dogs, with 6 legs and bodies covered in chitinous armor that gleamed purple-black in the firelight. Their heads had no eyes, just circular mouths full of rotating teeth. They moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. Because that's exactly what they were. Defensive formation, Sergeant bellowed, his heavy plasma cannon already firing. The humans formed a circle around the landed shuttles. Weapons opened up with a roar that echoed across the square. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds tore into the swarm. Bodies exploded or were thrown back, but more rushed forward to replace them. Wu fired his rifle in controlled bursts, years of training taking over. Aim, shoot, shift, shoot. They were fast, but humans had hunted fast prey on Earth for thousands of years. The instincts were still there. A leap dat. She dropped her medical bag and pulled her sidearm in one smooth motion, firing 3 times. The creature fell at her feet, its legs still twitching. "Thanks for volunteering me for this, Captain." She shouted over the gunfire, but she was smiling. "You're welcome," Wu shouted back. Then he saw them, figures running from a building across the square. Tall, slender beings with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. There were maybe 20 of them, stumbling and exhausted. A pack was closing in from behind. "Covering fire, give them a corridor." The big sergeant pivoted his cannon and unleashed hell. The plasma stream carved through the pack, creating a path. They ran through it, their movements graceful even in terror. They reached the human defensive line and collapsed inside it. Immediately moved to help them, pulling out her scanner. One looked up at Wu with eyes that seemed too large for his face. He spoke, and the translator in Wu's helmet rendered it into Korean. You came, no one else came, why?" "Later," Wu said. "Right now, we need to get you somewhere safe." This name was En, and he was some kind of leader or coordinator. He looked at the humans with an expression that mixed gratitude and disbelief. "Safe? There is nowhere safe. The swarm consumes everything. We sent messages for 3 weeks. 20 civilizations received them. 20 civilizations said they would send help later, or that they needed to study the situation, or that their resources were committed elsewhere." His voice broke. Everyone said you were savage, violent, dangerous, but you came." Put a gentle hand on his arm while she scanned for injuries. "We heard you asking for help. How could we not come?" And stared at her like she was speaking a language he had never heard before. The battle continued for 2 hours. More shuttles landed, bringing heavy equipment and supplies. Engineer Wu set up automated turrets while trying to tear him apart. He worked with a piece of shrapnel in his shoulder, refusing medical attention until the fortifications were complete. "It's just a scratch," he said when tried to treat him. "That's a metal spike through your shoulder," she protested. "Like I said, a scratch. I'll get it fixed when I'm done." He went back to welding support beams. They watched all of this in growing amazement. They saw humans take injuries that would incapacitate any and keep fighting. They saw humans work in temperatures that felt like fire to their heat-sensitive skin. They saw humans lift equipment that weighed more than any could carry. "Your gravity," and said to Wu during a brief lull in the fighting. "I accessed the public records. Your world has 1.3 times the gravity we consider standard. How do you survive?" "We grew up in it," Wu said simply. "This planet feels light to us." He didn't mention that some Marines were already complaining about the weak gravity, making them feel unsteady. By the time night fell, the humans had established a secure perimeter around the survivors. 217 had made it to safety. Wu knew there were thousands more scattered across the city, hiding, waiting to die. Commander contacted him from orbit. "Status: perimeter secure. We have survivors, but Captain, this is worse than we thought. The swarm is smart, it adapts, and there are so many of them." "Can we win?" asked. Wu looked out at the city. In the darkness, he could see the moving, hear their clicking and scraping. They never stopped, never slept, never retreated. He thought about Earth, about evolution, about how humans became the dominant species on a planet full of things that wanted to kill them. "Yes," he said, "we can win, but it's going to cost us." In the makeshift medical tent, worked on a wounded while human marines stood guard outside. The alien held her hand and whispered, "Why? Why do you care?" Thought about it for a moment, then she smiled. "Because someone should, and we're here so we do." It was that simple, and that complicated. The galaxy had abandoned them to their fate, but the galaxy had never met humans before, had never seen what could do when they decided to care. They would learn the hard way. Sat in the command tent, surrounded by holographic displays showing data about Earth. Around her, a dozen scientists watched in silence. They had asked to understand why humans fought so differently from any species they had ever known. Now they were learning, and the knowledge terrified them. "This is Earth," said, pulling up an image of the blue-green planet. She was someone who studied alien life. But for the past 3 years, she had specialized in explaining humans to a galaxy that didn't understand them. The Galactic Council classifies it as a Class 12. That's the highest danger rating. One of the scientists, a female named In, raised a delicate hand. "What makes it so dangerous?" Pulled up a new display. "The gravity, for one. Earth's gravity is 1.3 times galactic standard. You feel heavy here on Prime, right?" The nodded. There had low gravity, making this planet feel dense and oppressive. To humans, this feels light, easy. Earth's gravity means we evolved with denser bones, stronger muscles, and more efficient cardiovascular systems. A human child can carry weight that would exhaust an adult. She changed the display to show Earth's atmosphere. "Our air has 21% oxygen. Most species find that toxic. Your atmosphere only has 14%. For humans, that's like being on a mountain. We can breathe it, but it's thin." "But the oxygen is not the main danger," another said. "No," agreed. "The main danger is everything else. Earth has extreme weather. Hurricanes with winds that can tear apart buildings. Tornadoes that throw vehicles through the air. Temperatures that range from 50 degrees below freezing to 50 degrees above boiling water." She pulled up images of Earth's predators: lions, bears, sharks, crocodiles. "Humans are not the apex predator on Earth. We became the apex predator. We evolved alongside creatures that could kill us easily. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and more stubborn than anything else." And looked at the images with wide eyes. "Your world tried to kill you for millions of years." "Yes," said simply, "and we learned to kill it back. That's why we fight the way we do." Outside the tent, the lesson was being taught in a more direct way. Lieutenant flew his atmospheric fighter through the smoke-filled sky above the city. Below him, a mass of flying rose to meet him, their wings beating in perfect synchronization. They fired bioplasma from specialized organs, filling the air with green fire. Dove straight into them. His fighter twisted and rolled, moving in ways that would tear apart most alien vessels. But human fighters were built for human pilots, and human pilots evolved on a world where survival meant pushing limits. He fired as he flew, his plasma cannons tracking targets with computer-assisted precision. Exploded in midair, raining down on the city below. But more came. "Control, I count 300 flying variants," he reported calmly. "Permission to engage full combat protocols." "Granted," came the reply. Grinned. Full combat protocols meant he could stop being careful. He pushed his fighter into a climb that would black out most species from the G-forces. At the top of the climb, he flipped the fighter completely inverted and dove again, engines screaming. They tried to follow, but their biology couldn't handle the rapid pressure changes. Dozens fell from the sky, their internal organs ruptured. The ones that survived found themselves facing a pilot who had trained in Earth's atmosphere, where wind shear and turbulence could kill you in seconds. This was easy by comparison. On the ground, Sergeant Jin led a special forces team through the ruins of a residential area. They moved in complete darkness, using night vision gear to see. They had excellent sensing abilities, but they were not designed for night operations. Humans were. For millions of years, humans hunted at dawn and dusk, in the low light where prey couldn't see them coming. Their eyes evolved to work in darkness. Their hearing became sharp enough to locate threats they couldn't see. Jin held up a fist and his team froze. Ahead, a patrol scuttled through the ruins. There were 12 of them, moving with that eerie coordination that marked the hive mind. He used hand signals. His team spread out, taking positions. Then he triggered a small noisemaker and threw it to the left. They immediately swarmed toward the sound. As they did, the human team opened fire from the right, using suppressed weapons that barely made a sound. They went down without ever knowing they were under attack. "Area clear," Jin reported, proceeding to objective. Their objective was a shelter where 200 civilians were trapped. The had surrounded it, trying to break through the reinforced doors. Jin's team hit them from behind. They never had a chance. By the time they realized they were under attack, half their number was dead. The survivors tried to retreat, but humans were persistent hunters. Jin's team pursued them through 3 city blocks, running them down in the darkness. When the shelter doors opened, Exhausted found human soldiers standing guard, barely breathing hard after the chase. Back at the main perimeter, Engineer Wu finally let pull the shrapnel from his shoulder. He sat on a supply crate while she worked, not even flinching. "You know," she said, "on most worlds, this would require surgery and weeks of recovery." "Good thing we're not from most worlds," Wu replied. Nearby and watched the interaction. He had been observing humans for 3 days now, trying to understand them. It was difficult. They were contradictions. They were gentle with the wounded, showing compassion that surprised him. But in battle, they were ruthless. They laughed and joked even when facing death, but they mourned their fallen with deep emotion. They followed orders with military discipline, but they also questioned those orders and offered suggestions. "You are not what we expected," he said too. She looked up from bandaging Wu's shoulder. "What did you expect?" "The galaxy says are savage, brutal, that you solve everything with violence because your world taught you nothing else." Smiled sadly. "Our world taught us that life is precious because it's fragile. Everything on Earth is trying to survive against terrible odds. We learned to value survival, to protect it. By being violent. By being strong enough to protect the things we care about." She finished the bandage. "Our world made us tough, yes, but it also made us care deeply because we know what it's like to struggle." Wu stood up, testing his shoulder. "Perfect, thanks." He walked away to continue working on the defensive barriers. And watched him go. "He has a serious injury, he should rest." "Try telling him that," said. "Humans are stubborn. Our planet couldn't kill us, and we're not about to let some bugs do it either." In orbit, Commander reviewed the battle reports. The numbers were sobering. 3 human ships had taken damage. 70 Marines were wounded. 12 were dead. But they were winning. Though for all their numbers and coordination were starting to falter. They had never faced an enemy like humans before. An enemy that could breathe thin air, fight in darkness, withstand injuries, and just keep coming. They adapted to every species they encountered. They learned patterns and exploited weaknesses. But how do you adapt to a species whose main survival trait is refusing to give up? Opened a communication to the fleet. "All ships prepare for the next phase. We're taking the fight to their hive ships." It was a dangerous plan, maybe even reckless, but humans had survived on a death world by taking risks that would terrify more cautious species. On Prime, survivors gathered in the human-protected zones. They watched these strange aliens from the Forbidden with growing wonder. They saw humans carry equipment through heat that would cook alive. They saw humans work for days with minimal sleep. They saw humans share their rations with hungry, even when it meant they went hungry themselves. In Found after the briefing, "I understand now," she said quietly. "Your world made you strong, but that's not why you came here." No asked. "No, you came because your world also made you kind. You know what it's like to suffer, so you cannot stand by when others suffer." Nodded slowly. It tried to kill us for millions of years, but we didn't just survive. We learned to thrive. We learned to build societies, create art, explore, dream. And yes, we learned to care." She looked out at the human Marines preparing for the next battle. "The galaxy sees our strength and calls us monsters. They don't see that our strength exists to protect, not just to destroy." "I see it now," In said, "and I will make sure the galaxy sees it too." The night deepened. The regrouped, preparing their next assault. And the humans prepared to meet them, these strange warriors from a world of endless challenges who had crossed the stars because someone needed help. The had arrived, and they were here to stay. The turning point came on the 7th day. Captain Wu stood in the ruins of what had been a beautiful park, surrounded by his officers. The holographic map showed their situation clearly. The humans had saved 12,000 and established 3 secure zones across the capital city, but the cost had been terrible. "Casualties?" he asked quietly. Lieutenant reported, his voice flat. 473 wounded, 89 dead. We're at 40% combat effectiveness." 40%. Less than half his force remained at full strength. The Wu asked. Grateful, terrified. "They can't believe we're still fighting." Wu nodded. He couldn't believe it either some days. But what else could they do? Run. Leave these people to die after coming so far. "They are massing for a major assault," Sergeant said, pointing to the map. "Intelligence says they're gathering every unit within 100 kilometers. They're going to hit us with everything." "When?" Wu asked. 36 hours, maybe less." Wu studied the map. With 40% effectiveness against the full force, they would be overrun. The math was simple and brutal. Unless they changed the game. "Get me Commander," he said. In the medical station, Doctor worked on her 73rd consecutive hour of surgery. Her hands shook from exhaustion, but she kept cutting, sealing, saving. Human soldiers, civilians, anyone who needed help. A young Marine, barely 19 years old, lay on the table with massive wounds across his chest, worked with desperate precision, trying to repair the damage. The kid's name was Wu, and he had saved a family by using his own body as a shield. "Stay with me," whispered as she worked. "Come on, stay with me." But the damage was too severe. She felt his life slip away under her hands despite everything she tried. Stepped back, her eyes burning. She had lost count of how many soldiers she'd lost. Each one felt like a personal failure. Put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Doctor, you need to rest." "People are dying," said. "And you'll die too if you keep this up. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Wanted to argue, but her body agreed with. She stumbled to a cot and fell asleep instantly. Outside in the command post, Wu explained his plan to Commander via video link. "A boarding action," said, her eyes widening, "on a hive ship. It's the only way. The swarm is controlled by queen nodes on those ships. Take out the queens and the swarm collapses. Intelligence officer cracked their communication patterns. We know where the main hive ship is. You'd have to fight through thousands of in zero gravity, in their own ship, with no way to retreat," said. "Yes, ma'am. It's suicide. It's the only option that lets the survive." Was silent for a long moment, then she sighed. I'll authorize it, but Wu, come back alive, that's an order. I'll do my best, Commander. The plan was desperate. The carrier would get close to the main hive ship. A boarding team would use breaching pods to punch through the hull. Then they would fight their way to the Queen node and destroy it. Simple, impossible, necessary. Wu selected his team personally. Volunteers only. He expected maybe 50 Marines to step forward. All 473 wounded and unwounded Marines volunteered. Sir said, with respect, if you don't pick me for this, I'll be very disappointed. Wu picked 30 Marines. The best fighters, the ones with the most experience. He tried to pick soldiers without families, but almost all of them had someone back on Earth. They all came anyway. On the ground, squad leader prepared for what might be his last mission. He was assigned to hold a defensive position while the boarding action happened. They would throw everything at the human perimeter, trying to overwhelm them while their hive ship was vulnerable. Squad had 12 Marines. They were tasked with holding an intersection that was critical to the defensive line. If it fell, the whole perimeter would collapse. We hold here, told his squad. No matter what comes, we hold. The Marines nodded. They checked their weapons, their ammunition, their resolve. One young private, a woman named Ah, looked scared, sat down next to her. First combat drop, he asked. Yes, Sergeant. Scared. Yes, Sergeant. Good, fear keeps you sharp, but remember, we're not here to die. We're here to fight, and humans are really, really good at fighting. Ah smiled weakly. Yes, Sergeant. The assault began 18 hours later, faster than expected. They must have sensed the human plan somehow. Squad heard them coming before they saw them. A clicking, scraping sound like a million insects moving together. Then they appeared, a wave of chitinous bodies flowing through the streets like a living flood. Open fire, shouted. The intersection became a killing ground. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds tore into the wave. Bodies piled up, but more came, always more. The Marine next to went down, a claw through his chest. Killed the attacker and dragged his wounded comrade back, but he knew they were losing ground. Fall back to secondary position, he ordered. They retreated 20 meters and set up again. They came on. In space, they dove toward the massive hive ship. The alien vessel was organic, a huge chitinous structure that pulsed with sickly light. It fired bioplasma at the carrier, scoring hits across the hull. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7, someone shouted. Keep going, Wu commanded. Get us close enough for the pods. The carrier shuddered as another blast hit. Alarms blared, but they closed the distance. Launch pods. 6 boarding pods shot from them like bullets, each carrying 5 Marines in powered armor. They slammed into the hive ship's hull and drilled through, breaching the interior. Wu was in the first pod. When it opened, he stepped into a nightmare. The inside of the hive ship was a maze of organic tunnels, pulsing with veins and covered in a sticky secretion. And it was full of. Move forward, don't stop, Wu shouted. The Marines fought in the cramped tunnels, plasma fire lighting the darkness. Came from all directions, but the humans moved with brutal efficiency. Years of training in close-quarters combat took over. Led the way with his heavy cannon, literally burning a path through the swarm. Behind him, the team advanced, stepping over bodies. They lost 2 Marines in the first tunnel, 3 more at the first junction, but they kept moving. On the ground, squad was down to 6 Marines. They had retreated to their final position, a reinforced bunker at the intersection. Ammunition was running low. Ah had stopped looking scared. She fired her rifle with mechanical precision, her face blank, had seen it before. The moment when fear became determination. We're almost out of plasma cells, one Marine reported. Switch to kinetics, said, make every shot count. A broke through their line, killed it with his combat knife, feeling the blade scrape against its armor. Another Marine went down. 4 Marines left. Started singing, an old Earth song his grandmother had taught him about standing firm and never giving up. The other Marines joined in, their voices rough but defiant. They kept coming, the humans kept fighting. Inside the hive ship, Wu's team reached the Queen Chamber. It was a vast organic cavity filled with writhing eggs and tended by specialized. At the center sat the Queen Node, a massive creature that pulsed with the hive mind's consciousness. "Men," Wu shouted, "place the charges." Demolition's expert Min ran forward but slashed her leg. She fell, crying out. Another Marine tried to help her but swarmed him. Min crawled forward, leaving a trail of blood. She reached the Queen Node and started placing charges with shaking hands. Stabbed her in the back. She kept working. "Charges set," she gasped. 30 seconds. "Fall back," Wu ordered. "Min, move." "Can't," she said simply. Blood filled her mouth. "Too hurt, go." "That's an order, Marine." Min smiled. Blood stained her teeth. "Sorry, sir, not this time." She triggered the detonator manually. The explosion tore through the Queen Chamber. Wu's team ran through the tunnels as the hive ship began to die. Behind them, organic walls collapsed and fell, their connection to the hive mind severed. They made it to the pods with 11 Marines left from the original 30. As they launched back they saw the hive ship tear itself apart. On the ground, the attacking's position suddenly stopped mid-assault. They froze, confused, and then began to scatter. "They're retreating," Ah shouted in disbelief. Lowered his rifle. They had held. 2 Marines left from 12, but they had held. All across Prime, the swarm collapsed. Without the Queen Node's coordination, they became just animals, fleeing in random directions. The humans had won, at terrible cost, but they had won. And found Wu in the medical bay. The captain sat with his head in his hands, thinking of the 19 Marines who wouldn't be going home. "Why?" and asked softly, "Why did you sacrifice so much for us?" Wu looked up. His eyes were red. "Because no one came when we needed help," he said. "Earth was alone for so long. We remember that feeling. We won't let anyone else feel it if we can help." And sat down beside him. "Your people are heroes." "No," Wu said. "They're just humans, and sometimes that's enough." The funeral took place on Prime 3 days after the battle ended. Commander stood before 107 graves, each marked with a simple metal cross. They had wanted to build elaborate monuments, but the humans refused. Simple markers were enough. 12,000 gathered to watch the ceremony. They had insisted on attending, every single one of them. They stood in silence as read the names of the fallen. When she finished, she looked at the crowd. "These men and women came from a world most of you know only as a forbidden. They came because you needed help. They stayed because that's what humans do. They gave their lives because they believed some things are worth dying for." She paused, her voice catching. "The galaxy called them savage, brutal, uncivilized. But I ask you, is it savage to help strangers? Is it brutal to sacrifice yourself for others? Is it uncivilized to care?" And stepped forward. He had asked to speak and had agreed. "We sent messages to 20 civilizations," he said, his voice amplified across the gathering. 20 advanced species who pride themselves on being civilized, enlightened, superior to the violent of Earth. He looked at the graves. Not one of them came. They sent diplomatic notes. They sent condolences. They sent promises of future aid that never arrived. They sent everything except help. His voice grew stronger. Earth sent soldiers. Earth sent ships. Earth sent people who were willing to die for a species they had never met, and the galaxy calls them uncivilized. The crowd murmured in agreement. Today, we bury 107 humans who had more honor in their hearts than the entire Galactic Council has in its chambers. Today, We remember that civilization is not measured by technology or philosophy. It is measured by whether you help when others cannot help themselves. The murmur became a roar of approval. On Earth, the news of the battle spread quickly. Videos taken by survivors showed human Marines fighting impossible odds. The footage was raw and brutal. It showed humans bleeding, dying, and winning. The Galactic Council tried to suppress the videos. They failed. Within a week, the recordings had reached every civilized world. Beings across the galaxy watched in shock as the savage displayed courage, sacrifice, and compassion that put their own species to shame. The political fallout was immediate. The ambassador from the Confederacy stood before the Galactic Council, broadcasting his speech across all channels. For 3 centuries, this council has voted to exclude Earth from our deliberations. We called them too violent, too dangerous, too primitive. He pulled up footage of Sergeant carrying wounded to safety while under fire. Is this violence? This Marine risked his life for aliens he had never met. Another video showed Corporal working for 70 hours straight, saving lives. Is this primitive? This medic showed more dedication than doctors from worlds with 10,000 years of medical advancement. A final video showed demolitions expert men, bleeding and dying, still placing charges to save people she would never meet. Is this dangerous? This woman gave her life so an entire species could survive. The ambassador's voice grew cold. The only danger here is to our pride. They exposed our cowardice. They showed the galaxy what we truly are, not enlightened, not civilized, just comfortable, and too comfortable to risk anything for others. The council chamber erupted in argument. Some species defended the decision to not help it had been too dangerous, they said, too far, too costly. But their words rang hollow when compared to the videos of humans fighting and dying for strangers. Within a month, 3 species from the Galactic Council in protest. Within 2 months, 7 more joined them. The council, which had stood for 4,000 years, began to fracture. On Prime, reconstruction continued. But now, human engineers worked alongside builders. Human doctors trained medical students. Human Marines taught defense forces how to fight. Ran weapons drills with a group of young who had volunteered for military service. They struggled with the heavy equipment, but they tried hard. "You're weak," said bluntly. "Your gravity is too light, your world too gentle. You'll never be strong like humans." The students looked discouraged. But continued, "You have something we don't. You can share thoughts telepathically. You can coordinate without speaking. Use that. Don't try to fight like humans, fight like." One student raised a hand. "Why help us? You already saved us." Shrugged his massive shoulders. "Because saving you once isn't enough. We want to make sure you can save yourselves next time." In the medical center, doctor taught physicians about human emergency medicine. They were fascinated and horrified by how much damage a human could survive. "This patient had a piece of metal through his lung," explained, showing a scan of Engineer Wu. "On most worlds, that's fatal. For humans, it's serious but survivable if treated quickly." "Your species is terrifying," one doctor said. Smiled, "Our species is resilient. There's a difference." Across the galaxy, Earth began to receive its first diplomatic contacts, trade requests, alliance offers, technology exchanges. Species that had ignored humanity for 2 decades suddenly wanted to talk. Commander reviewed the messages with Wu in her office on the 47 diplomatic requests, she said. "They all want something from us now." "Do we respond?" Wu asked. "Some of them maybe, but not the ones who refused to help." His voice was firm. "We remember who stood with us and who didn't. The galaxy needs to learn that actions have consequences." Wu nodded. "Speaking of consequences, the Council is sending a delegation to meet with us." "Let me guess. They want to discuss Earth's unauthorized military action or some similar nonsense." Close, they want to address concerns about aggression. Laughed bitterly. We saved an entire species, and they're worried about aggression. The delegation arrived 2 weeks later. 7 ambassadors from major council species, all trying to look dignified and concerned. Met them in a conference room on Prime. Behind her stood Wu and 3 other human officers. Around the room's perimeter stood survivors and their families. The lead ambassador, a tall being with crystalline skin, began with a prepared speech about galactic law and the importance of following proper protocols. Let him finish, then she stood up. "You're right," she said. "We broke protocol. We should have filed proper forms, waited for authorization, assembled a committee to study the situation." She walked to the window which overlooked the city. Reconstruction crews, human and working together, rebuilt damaged buildings. By the time your protocols were finished, there would be no one left to save. 12,000 would be dead. An entire civilization would be extinct. The ambassador tried to speak, but continued. "You want to discuss our aggression? Fine. We were aggressive in defending the defenseless. We were aggressive in refusing to let people die while bureaucrats debated. We were aggressive in believing that some things are more important than proper forms." She turned back to face them. "If that makes Earth too dangerous for your council, then we're fine staying excluded. We'd rather be dangerous and helpful than civilized and useless." The room fell silent, then stood up. "The Directorate wishes to make a formal statement," he said. "We are withdrawing from the Galactic Council and forming a direct alliance with Earth." The ambassadors looked shocked. "Furthermore," and continued, "we are broadcasting the complete records of our request for help, including every species that received our message and every response we received. The galaxy will know who helped and who didn't." Others stood up, one by one, until the entire room was standing except for the council delegation. The ambassadors left shortly after, their mission a complete failure. 3 months later, Earth signed its first treaty, not with the Galactic Council, but with the 4 other species who had withdrawn from the Council in protest. They called it the Mutual Defense Alliance. The treaty was simple. If one member was attacked, all would respond. No committees, no debates, just immediate action. Within a year, 12 more species joined. They called themselves the Alliance, though most members came from normal worlds. The name was both ironic and serious. It meant they valued action over comfort, courage over caution. Back on Earth, Commander retired from active duty. At her retirement ceremony, she was asked what she was most proud of. "We changed the galaxy," she said. "Not by being the strongest or the most advanced. We changed it by showing that caring matters, that helping strangers matters, that some things are worth fighting for." She looked out at the crowd of soldiers, humans and aliens now serving together. "Earth it made us tough, but it also made us understand that survival means cooperation, that strength means protecting the weak, and that civilization is measured by who you help, not who you exclude." On Prime, a monument stood in the center of the capital city. It showed a human marine carrying a child to safety. The inscription read simply, "They came when no one else would." Every year on the anniversary of the battle, beings from across the galaxy visited the monument. They came to remember the day that showed the galaxy what true civilization looked like. Lieutenant, now a flight instructor, taught young pilots from a dozen species. When asked why humans had responded to the plea, he always gave the same answer. "We heard someone asking for help. How could we not respond?" It was that simple and that profound. The galaxy had called Earth savage for being from but Earth had learned something important from its brutal home. Life is precious because it's difficult. Survival is valuable because it's hard-won. And helping others survive is the highest calling because you understand what they're going through. Years later, when asked about the incident, a historian from the Directorate wrote, The Galactic Council taught us about civilization for 4,000 years, but it took from Earth to show us what civilization actually means. Humanity never forgot the lesson either. They remembered that they had been alone once, excluded and ignored. They remembered the feeling, and they made sure no one else would ever feel that way again. The galaxy had begged for help, only Earths had responded. And in doing so, they changed everything.